Okay. Let me go in front of this light so that
All
we
right. Thank you so much for coming, Marianne. This is the Scott Tillman Show. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about reimagining America with you.
Good, good. Let's do that.
All right. So one of the things before I start, I wanted to tell you, because I supported your campaign when you ran, and I still have this from when we did our campaign. I kept the poster, and I also kept your
Very cool.
the greeting cards, one of the greeting cards.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I recently just read your book, The Healing of America. And in your book, you after every sentence you had me like, whoa. So in the book you said within the next 10 years, America will have a renaissance or a catastrophe. Something is going to happen to bring us back to who we are. And you later said, this renaissance will come from neither left nor right. It is neither a bridge to a person or a bridge to the future, but a bridge to who we most deeply are. While of course you are right, how did you know where we'd end up, and how did the populist uprising that's in our midst come about?
You know, I used to say to AIDS patients during the AIDS crisis, your doctor is a physician, I'm a metaphysician.
Mm-hmm.
Your doctor knows what's happening on the outside. My field of expertise and skill has to do with the psychological and emotional dynamics that affect what's happening in the outside. Now, back in the 1990s, when I wrote that book, everybody was going around saying everything was great. But I was saying, doesn't that depend on what neighborhood you live in? Because if you drive a few miles from here, it's not so great. And if you fly a few miles from here, it's not so great. Because what a soulless system does is that whatever human suffering is necessary to prop up the system, you just keep it on the other side of town or on the other side of the world, because people do have hearts, people do have a conscience. So if they see it, then okay, well, what about that person, or what about that child? Mm-hmm. So the system puts blinders on you. Well, you're just not going to go into that part of town, or you're not going to go over to that side of the world. Now, Martin Luther King said that there's negative peace and positive peace. Mm-hmm. He said negative peace is where there's no outright conflict, but there's an underlying tension and anxiety. Positive peace can only be built on brotherhood and justice. So in my world, I felt the underlying tension and anxiety. And I understand how the law of cause and effect works. Mm-hmm. It's like when Thomas Jefferson said, I tremble for my country when I consider God as just, and that his justice shall not sleep forever. He knew it was going to, someday there was going to be a reckoning. Mm-hmm. And in Lincoln's second inaugural, he refers to slavery and to the Civil War. As a great reckoning, which had to come. Whether you're looking at it in terms of spiritual or religious, or even in terms of physics, there's going to be a reaction mm-hmm. to whatever we do. So I knew that too much was happening that America was not looking at, mm-hmm. and that if we continued to not look at it, and that was the purpose in writing the book. Hey guys, we can look at this. We can change now. You know, in the Course in Miracles, it says, it's not up to you what you learn. It's merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. Mm-hmm. We all have stuff to look at. Every nation has stuff to look at. But if you do look at it and you're willing to face it and you're willing to atone and you're willing to make amends, but only then you can change the trajectory of your history.
You know, and you said something too that I loved about the book. I was watching a video that you did when you were doing one of your talks on A Course in Miracles, and you said that had you written, a friend of yours told you that you should have written the book under a pseudonym, and I'm so glad that you didn't, because I think that it needed to be said, and I think that seeing it come from you means a lot more than, if it had been under a different title. I don't think many people would have been like, I still think the book sales would have went up. I really do, under your name. I think that it's an amazing book. And also, may I add too, I was going to ask you as well, after I read the book, I felt as if, a friend of mine said, America has never been great. And he's in his 60s. And you know what? Hearing that come from him says a lot. If he says this country's never been great as long as he's lived here, then obviously that means something. In my generation, we're about to see our fourth president, Joe Biden. And I've lived through Bush, I've lived through Obama, I've lived through Trump, and now seeing as Biden come in, my generation really is not pleased, Marianne, as far as, you know, I'm a very progressive person, and we want to see a progressive in the White House. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, you know, that Biden needs to move more to the center. You know, Republicans never say, let's move to the center. You know, Democrats are always the ones who say, let's move to the center and let's try to get in, you know, we don't like Mitch McConnell. However, we will accept him, you know, if he wants to come to the table. We're not cool with, you know, John Kasich, but, you know, because we want to win this campaign, we're going to involve him into our team as well. So it's like they're making a home now for the GOP rather than make a home for the progressives. And so that's why I'm saying, you know, we've got to figure out, to me, I think a new third party is the option. And I loved seeing you in the People's Convention, seeing you do that. I know some people were just like, oh, that's provocative. Why is she doing this? It was great that you were there, because it's time to go third party. I at least feel, you know, and, you know, in that convention speech, you said a new birth of freedom is struggling to be born, emerging from the hearts and minds of millions of people who no longer are willing to go along with systems that devolve rather than evolve our life on earth. And I was going to ask you, you know, now that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have won the election, and seeing how both parties are refusing to acknowledge progressives in the populist movement, do you think a new third party can win in 2024? And if so, how can we overcome the blocks of the two-party system?
I think that, hold on just a moment. Wendy, hold on just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, I can't. Where are you? Wendy? Wendy? I can't. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to edit that. I wear hearing aids, you know, so when there are two conversations going, it turns to gray for me, and I can't.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. Everything that you just said is so filled with significance, and there are many, many layers of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about a third party, on one hand, as you read in that book, third parties have had a very important role in American history.
Mm-hmm.
Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, it's very much to the detriment of our good, the way the Republicans and the Democrats have formed a kind of unholy alliance,
Mm-hmm.
which is meant to marginalize any third party voices. So that is very true. But it's also very true that we have to be very careful about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at something like the election in 2016 and the votes that Jill Stein got,
Mm-hmm.
that would have made the difference. And if that candidacy had not existed, we would never have had Donald Trump.
Yes, ma'am.
So the way I look at it is, you just described a reality as a given.
Mm-hmm.
You just described the Democratic Party as making no space for progressives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're correct that that certainly was the case for the most part with the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certainly the struggle, the contest that is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Each of us has to follow our own heart. What you just said, and what I think I've also seen you say on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
is that you're done. I, Scott, need to know that I did everything I could to save this marriage before I leave it.
Right.
So for me, and partly because I'm older than you,
Mm-hmm.
I have a historical memory of a time when the Democratic Party did, despite whatever else was problematical, did indisputably stand for the values of democracy and advocacy for the working people that progressives crave.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not quite so simple for me for both of those reasons. Number one, the damage it can do under certain circumstances. And number two, the fact that I know so many people who are Democrats, including elected officials,
Mm-hmm.
who are progressives, who are seeking to work from within.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't crossed the line. I have crossed the line enough that I spoke at the convention for the People's Party. I
Mm-hmm.
have great respect for Nick Brana
Mm-hmm.
and other people working there.
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge and really appreciate the depth of their sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
They're not playing a money and power game. They're there for the right reasons. And they're right. They're right about the two-party duopoly. And
Mm-hmm.
it might be, I don't know where I'll be in a year or two. It might be that there will be time and certainly I support their efforts, that what they're doing, I'm not in any way criticizing their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I don't know where I will be in 2 years. I don't know if I will feel that it's time for a pox on both your houses
Mm-hmm.
presidential candidacy. I think that a lot of that will be determined by what happens in the next few months and years. Right now, it's not looking good, though.
Oh
The
yeah.
attack on AOC,
Mm-hmm.
and as a Black man yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I think that using Hakeem Jeffries
I
as
know.
the face of the attack on her,
Mm-hmm.
how cynical is that?
I know. And that's the same thing that I was saying too, Marianne, is because last night I did a podcast with Josh from the New Progressive Voice, who you've seen. I did one with him, and I did one with my friend Jolie, who lives in North Carolina, and she's a progressive too. And we've been trying to figure out what's the progressive plan forward. What should we do? And I've heard Nina Turner say that we have to slay two dragons here: the neo-fascist and the neoliberal. And she said that what we should do is to support the progressive candidates who are in the Democratic Party right now, like AOC, Cori Bush, who I'm excited for, what's his name, Jamal Bowman. I'm excited for him as well. And I've seen your work as well, doing the Down Ballot on YouTube, the Down Ballot podcast show that you've done. I am so glad that you did that, because there were so many good people like Julie Oliver, who I
Yeah,
wish would have won.
yeah,
And
me
seeing,
too.
I too support, I do believe that with the Democratic Party, it could be much better. It really could. And I support, I supported Joe and Kamala. I really hope that they do good. I really do. And I saw, with them talking about, his cabinet picks right now. I really don't have a good feeling about his cabinet. If Bernie isn't in there, or Elizabeth, or even Andrew to a degree, if he's not in there, or possibly Tulsi, I think we're toast going forward, because this is anything but Team of Rivals. This is not Team of Rivals. This is to me, when he said healing the soul of America, which he took that from you, to me that was a pseudonym for saying, okay, we're going to go back to the status quo. And Wall Street, you're going to be healed. You've seen what they did at the beginning of the pandemic. They made sure that Wall Street was bailed out first before they bailed out the American people. And then on top of that, you also see what's going on right now with, this. I saw in an interview that you said you wanted to move towards Medicare for all, seeing as to what happened to your shoulder. And, I've been having this conversation with a lot of people. And my thing is I would say, if not Medicare for all, at least a whole health plan. The plan that you proposed is a plan that I would love to have in our healthcare system. Make it for whoever wants it, but at the same time, get to the root cause of what's going on. Why are so many Americans getting so sick to begin with? And also too, with this virus, I honestly don't think that even when Kamala and Joe get in there, Marianne, I feel as if the virus is still going to be here, at least for the next 6 months or so after, So I was going to ask you, what do at what point do we say, okay, enough is enough? I know you said it would be, at least you don't know where you will be in a year or 2 years. But, do you see maybe because I know you said you don't want to contribute to another Trump, and I understand that as well. We don't want another person like Trump to come to power. But my question is, I've heard about Tucker Carlson running in 2024, which I honestly believe him or Trump could possibly be the nominee, seeing what's happening. But for the Democrats, I feel as if Joe will only do one term, and it'll be Kamala and Pete Buttigieg, as the nominee and vice presidential nominee. I know, the same thing I feel. We have to have somebody who has that Bernie-esque approach, who could get these people excited, who could get on that level. And the only people who come to mind is you and Nina Turner. I feel as if, I know you're not going to comment on whether or not you'll run or not. I know you can't say that, but I feel as if you have to run again, because I've never seen a candidate like you before, Marianne, who has inspired me to, you make me see things completely differently. I did not know. I used to think this country was great until I seen the homelessness and poverty in this country. It's like what you said before, we can't be great if we're not good, and I see homeless people, under the bridge here where I live. And I try to make sure I give them $1 or $2 whenever, if I have it, something to make them feel better, and, I think that, as I said before, you have to run again. You reminded me of Dennis Kucinich when he ran. I enjoyed Dennis Kucinich and Mike Gravel in the 2008 and 2004 campaigns. I went back and watched them. And I feel as if we had a true alternative to Donald Trump, not only would he have beat him, we would have also beat Trumpism. We got by a hair. And we need to start thinking about a real alternative. And I see that being you and Nina Turner, or either Jesse Ventura as well. You guys give so much. You guys are able to excite the people and tell the truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you so much. And once again, Scott, your questions are so multi-layered. They're so packed. There's so much in there. First of all, I want to go back to the first thing you said, where your guest had said we have to slay two dragons, the neo-fascists and the neoliberals. I would be very careful with that. When it comes to neo-fascists, absolutely you slay the dragon.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to neoliberals, that's not a dragon for us to slay. It's a political opponent for us to oppose. And there's a real difference. There's a real difference.
Yes, ma'am.
Neoliberals have a view, and we have a view, but it's all within the purview of the golden mean of American politics. We don't want to talk about slaying the dragon of our political opponent, because if you do, it actually diminishes what it means to say, no, when it comes to fascism, you do slay the dragon. When it comes to hate groups based on white supremacy, you do slay the dragon. When it comes to people who simply disagree with you, but they honor American democracy, you don't slay the dragon. You just oppose them. And it's a language difference, but it's also a real difference. The problem, of course, is the dominance of the neoliberal establishment within the Democratic Party, which started in the 1990s, really with Bill Clinton and the Democratic Leadership Conference. What had happened was, because money became such an element in a way it had never been before, Clinton felt, well, we need to prove that we can play with the big boys, the corporate big boy donors too. His whole point was that we could have it both ways. We as progressives don't feel you can have it both ways, because what the neoliberal establishment does is it sees the suffering that we acknowledge, but it only seeks to ameliorate it on the periphery. It won't challenge the underlying causes that make all those that suffering inevitable, because that would be standing up to the same corporate donors that they feel that they need in order to retain their power. Now, it's worth noting that Hillary Clinton made much more money, had much more money in the bank for her campaign than Trump did. So what happens is that when you compromise your ideals, what you gain in financial power, you lose in moral authority. So the neoliberals have money and power, but they don't have the Shakti on their side. They don't have the energy. You cannot compare a Joe Biden rally to a Bernie Sanders rally.
And that's what I've been saying as well. And I was going to one of the things I was going to tell you about that I thought was so interesting. I have so many of your books here already. I've got, Politics of Love, which is your most recent one. I've got this one, which is one of my friend's most favorite, Enchanted Love, which I'll get into that in just a minute. The Healing of America, and I have an original copy of A Return to Love.
Oh my God, you really do. That's first edition there.
Oh yeah, I've got, eBay is your best friend. But one of the things I was going to tell you about is seeing these rallies, and that's why I think going backwards to the primary, I honestly wish I did, go and meet Kamala and a lot of them when I had the chance to. But my main priority was meeting you, because when I was researching these candidates, I was just like, okay, who's running to defeat Trump? Because after I met him, I was just like, something's going on here. You could really feel the desperation amongst the Trump supporters. And I have a friend of mine who lives behind me who's a Trump supporter. He's a veteran, a Vietnam vet. And he's ready to go third party. Trump is the third party candidate for a lot of those people. The way he was able to come in and infiltrate the Republican Party, altogether, says a lot about not only just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well, seeing as how they were able to just crush Bernie and also crush you as well in the primary. We've got to do, what Josh said. He said, before we support a third party, we have to make sure we have down ballot. We have to, I think, down ballot voter registration. Something he said, about having these candidates, being on there I forget whatever it's called.
Yeah, what Nick has said about the People's Party is that he only wants to run people in those down ballot races in very safe Democratic seats, so that he would not be endangering
Right.
a Democratic win. And I respect that. Of course, for the presidential, it will be a different situation.
Oh yeah.
You know,
We got to
also,
get 15%. He said we have to get 15% on a national scale.
yeah, but that's just, well, he's saying that in order to be in the debates. But even then, if you're not way more popular than that, you could do more harm than good. I'm not criticizing anybody's opinion on this. Everybody just needs to be what their heart is, and it's a process and a journey each of us must take within ourselves. And we'll see where we land in another year or two. Another issue, though, about what you were just saying. God, I can't. You say so much now. I lost where I was going to go. Was something that you just said. I can't remember what it was specifically, but I do think it's worth noting that the jury's not in yet. You were talking about Biden's cabinet picks. Now, on one hand, I'm very concerned at the thought that an ex-governor of the Fed would be Secretary of the Treasury. I would much rather see an Elizabeth Warren, for instance.
I would like to see you as Health and Human Services rather than Mitt Romney.
No, actually, you know what? I wouldn't be good at that.
Really?
Yeah, because those are managerial positions. You know, a lot of people said, for instance, that I wasn't qualified to be president, which is kind of funny to me because, first of all, FDR said the primary role of the presidency is moral leadership. He said it's not the administrative aspect. The president doesn't sit here with a checkbook, you know, balancing the checkbook. The president sets a moral vision for the country and articulates policy positions which align with that vision and coalesces enough political force among the people to make the people willing to belong in that vision. So I always reject the notion that only the people whose careers have been entrenched for decades in the mindset that drove us into this ditch are the only people we should consider qualified to lead us out of the ditch. But when it comes to certain managerial conditions, like somebody suggested I run for mayor of some city, and I'm a terrible mayor, I wouldn't vote for me for mayor. I mean,
I
those
would.
are managerial conditions, not a good idea. But but the presidency is not just a managerial condition. It is a position that has to do with the articulation of a vision for a country that I believe should be based not only on the transactional political analyses that has become so much a part of politics today, but even more so on the visionary possibilities that are based on a deeper understanding of where people are in their hearts and their minds.
I agree. And that's why I think, you know, seeing, you know, your campaign, there was a lot to review. Chuck Rocha was on Katie Hopper's show the other day, and he said that there was absolutely nothing that we could have done that Bernie could have done to win because of not only just the pandemic, but after the consolidation of the moderates and so forth. And I really feel as if
wait. I want to ask a question. Is he saying the way it was, or even if he had gotten the nomination, he couldn't have won?
Oh, with the moderates of the consolidations, if Bernie was able to get the nomination, he would have beat Trump.
Yeah,
you know,
right. I agree with that, and I agree he would have won in 2016 as well.
Me too. I do so. I believe so as well, and that's why I'm going to move on from politics for a minute and go over to your book. You know, I love this book so much. I've read it 3 times. You know, Enchanted Love: The Mystical Power of Intimate Relationships. And I've been, and you know, because a lot of people are just like, Scott, you should go on more dates and things like that. And I was like, of course I am, definitely. But before that, you know, in the midst of a pandemic, there's not much you can do. You know, you can't go outside too far, you know. So I was going to ask you, you know, in your book, you said, the problem with most intimate relationships is that they're not romantic. They do not involve a deeper knowing, and that there is diminished possibility of sacred transformative sharing. What's your message to couples who are in conflict with each other under the pandemic, and what's the key to mystical power of having enchanted love for those looking to get in a relationship?
Well, first of all, with the quarantine, it is particularly difficult because people are together 24/7, much more than usual. So a lot of the stresses on a relationship are actually magnified. But in general, in our romantic relationships, we have the same problem, which is the poison and the toxicity that we have in our individual lives. We don't make space
Mm-hmm.
for the deeper waters of life. We don't make space for the sacred. We don't make space for the sharing of our authentic selves. We're up, we're running, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're on our computers, we're going here, we're going there. And every time we allow ourselves to be drawn too much, inappropriately, into the outer regions of the world, we
Mm-hmm.
pay a price that we are separating ourselves from those deeper places of love. Now, we pay a price for this in our individual lives, and we definitely pay a price for this in our romantic lives. Now, if you meet somebody and you have a hot connection, a sexual chemistry can compensate for that up to about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there has to be some deeper glue that holds people together than just sexual chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that when the Catholics say the family that prays together stays together,
Mm-hmm.
they're onto something, and not just because there's an injunction against divorce. When we meditate with other people,
Mm-hmm.
when we pray with other people, we forge a space within our consciousness. It is a space as real as the space of this room, but it's a space in the mind where it is easier to be in touch with what in AA is called conscious contact with
Mm-hmm.
the deeper regions of truth. And in intimate relationships, you know, there's a line that's very powerful. I don't know who first said, "Tell the truth as soon as you know it."
Mm-hmm.
In intimate relationships, it's quite an art form. Should I say something? Should I keep my mouth shut?
Mm-hmm.
If I say something, I better be careful how I say it. If I don't say it, I might sit on it, get resentful, and then spew it in an angry state later. I would have been better if I had said it earlier, but if I had said it earlier, can I say it with kindness and respect?
Mm-hmm.
Or as a matter of fact, is it something that I don't really need to say? Because if I just give it to God and realize it's my own stuff, I can move past it without even bringing it to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
These are the issues of intimacy. And you have to work through this stuff, and you can't work through it unless you really are creating the time and space that is necessary in order to do it. When you see couples who are, you know, everybody's on their tablet all the time, everybody's so busy all the time, even today, with being quarantined, when people are on the computer so much, or people are doing whatever they're doing, there's an actual avoidance of the deeper regions of contact. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I want to tell you something, Scott. I've been doing counseling with individuals and couples for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And before COVID, and what I saw before I ran for president, when I was still doing this, one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I saw was seeing a lot that I thought, wow, something is wrong. Something is really wrong here. Was how many young, beautiful couples were talking to me
Mm-hmm.
about the fact that they weren't having sex.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's libido was just, there was such a suppressive of something going on.
Mm-hmm.
And people that I look at and I go, wait, at your age, you guys aren't doing what's going on here.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is environmental toxicity and some things that are happening, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we have developed a culture
Mm-hmm.
which mitigates against the deeper sense of communion
Mm-hmm.
that I believe starts with the communion with God, starts with the communion with our own sense of higher power,
Mm-hmm.
our own sense of depth of who we are. But
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not making that deeper connection with who I am, it's going to be more difficult for me to make a deeper connection with who you are.
And I think that's something else that was interesting to me. I read a study a while back that talked about relationships and how a lot of people who are, because they work, you know, we're living in a new day and age. And you were talking about how some people are always on their smartphone. They're on their smartphone and just looking at things and scrolling, and that they're not paying attention to the movie theaters. They're not paying attention to each other. And a lot of these people.
They're on a date, but you know, they're sitting there next to each other
Mm-hmm.
and they're just looking on their tablets or even at dinner. I mean, it's almost a joke, except it's not a joke.
And that's something I've always said, you know, there's been dates that I've went on with certain girls, and I'll say, okay, you know, I put my phone down because you're here now. You know, there's no reason for me to want to be on my phone if you're here. You know, we're talking to
Exactly.
each other.
You know how
And
many people do not have that experience,
I know.
who find, and also children who find mommy and daddy aren't paying attention to me.
Hmm.
My lover's not paying attention to me. My husband's not paying attention to me. My wife is not paying attention to me, because we're so, and now with that movie, Social Dilemma,
Hmm.
we're all realizing it's because we're addicted. It's not just that we're being selfish in many cases, it's we're
Hmm. I
absolutely.
loved in the book where you said, there's this quote that I marked. It says, "Love is a hero's journey, and the hero's journey is a noble but difficult path. Recognizing this and honoring it as such endows romantic love with the grandeur and power it deserves. An overly casual mind might attract love easily enough, but lacks the emotional musculature necessary to maintain it. Love is a daytime as well as nighttime activity, and it demands that we become creatures of both. Every path of who we are is brought up for review, that we might let go what is heavy and low within us, and claim what is light and high. Romance then becomes a spiritual missile, taking us from where we've been to where we need to go." You know, and it's like the more and more I read this book, I'm just like, this is genius. My friend calls it her love Bible. And you know, and we read a lot of your books. I have almost all of your books, all 13 or 15 of them. I have almost all of them. And I wanted to ask you, on Lewis Ho's podcast, you said that love is a mystery. You know, what is the mystery of love to you?
First of all, I just want to say, when I meet people out in the world and they say that of all my books, their favorite is Enchanted Love, I feel a special bond.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really nice that you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
To say that love is a mystery, you know, we become a very rationalistic society.
Mm-hmm.
We think that there's a rational answer to everything, a technological answer to everything, an intellectual answer to everything. Although I think people realize more and more that that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way we've been trained to think. And love does not bow to that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I used to go here when I was like in my 30s. I used to go hear a woman speak in Los Angeles named Pat Allen. And I
Mm-hmm.
used to go hear her lectures every Monday night. And they were based, her work is, she's a relationship therapist, and
Mm-hmm.
her work is based on Carl Jung.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to understand that I was a generation of women who grew up at a time when our fathers, with the best of intention, thought that patting me on the back and telling me he was so proud of me that I achieved this or I achieved that, he had the best of intentions in propping me up as a girl who could achieve. But what I got from that was the belief, as did millions of women,
Mm-hmm.
that if I achieved enough, I would be loved. And in fact, it's very important when the girl hits puberty that the father continued to make her know that she is appreciated and loved for who she is, not just what she does,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who she is. And similarly, the other thing Pat Allen says is that a father, not only is it how a father treats a girl at a daughter at puberty, but also how important it is for a mother when her son reaches puberty to
Mm-hmm.
stop coddling his feelings and start respecting his thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That Pat Allen says, and I'll never forget this, she said, a man's greatest psychic craving is that his thoughts be respected.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman's greatest psychic craving is that her feelings be cherished.
Mm-hmm.
These to me are part of the love mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
They're not intellectual rules. They are deeper layers of understanding of where we really dwell within ourselves, depending on our sexual identity and our sense of gender.
Mm-hmm.
It's the more feminine aspect of the mind which perceives beyond rational knowing in those places of the mind and heart, which are absolutely equally important and without which we cannot have the lives we want.
Wow, I completely agree. I know that soon you have to go, so I have a couple more questions. The one I was going to ask you is what are some ways that we can return to love in a time of crisis? Like some different
Well,
activities we can
one
do?
of the things we have to do is to realize how angry we have all become
Mm-hmm.
and start monitoring ourselves. And I think this is as true on the left as on the right.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way to oppose, you know, and I do think we're in there for good reason. Politics, you got to duke it out.
Oh, yeah.
There is a way to treat the political opponent Now, I'm not talking about the fascists. I'm not talking about the white supremacist hate
Mhm.
groups. I'm talking about people who love democracy just as you do. None of
Mhm.
us have a monopoly on truth, but don't see it your way. There
Mhm.
is a way to seriously disagree with people without personally demonizing them. And we all need to develop the emotional discipline
Mhm.
to take responsibility for our part in the public discourse. And of course, it's been said for a long time that the left is a circular firing squad. I
Mhm.
mean, the brutality that I received when I was running for president, what wasn't even from conservatives. It was from people who, if they'd given me a chance to actually hear
Mhm.
what I was saying or read what my website said, thought I'm in full agreement with them.
Mhm.
Uh, but
It
we
goes
know
back
how.
to a quote that said, Democrats like to love their candidates while the conservatives just want somebody who'll just do for them. You know,
What?
there's a quote that says Democrats like to love their candidate while the Republicans, they just want somebody who will just do conservative things.
Well,
And
you know what? In that sense, it could be argued that conservatives are more psychologically mature about the whole thing.
mhm.
But this, with me, it wasn't just a failure to not able to love. It was about all the fairy dust that was thrown in people's eyes because,
Mhm.
based on
I know
smears.
being not able to get over those smears.
But my point is the meanness,
Mhm.
the brutality. And I think if we're going, it's kind of like in South Africa after apartheid, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission,
Mhm.
or what happened in Rwanda as well. After this election, all of us need to
Oh
spend
yeah.
some time not just pointing our fingers at other people, but really seeking a healing in our own hearts, to forgive
Mhm.
ourselves, to forgive others, and find a different ground of being within ourselves from which to approach political dialogue. Do we need to like duke it out on things like
Mhm.
neoliberals versus progressives? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But we can do it without personal meanness
Mhm.
and attack. And I think we must find
Oh
that
yeah. And I
sweet
find
spot.
myself
So
not
we're laying
being
it down
as
truly, but we're laying it down without meanness.
and I found myself, I'm not going to say that I was being cynical of some of the politicians or people, but I was being skeptical because I feel as if, I've heard some people say, and even I've heard this on the right as on the left, some people who have some concerns about Joe saying, at his age, what makes him think that he's going to be different than he was, years ago. And I try to tell people, as you said in your relationship course, every thought that you have to think with love. Every it has to be with love. And I agree, we have to, instead of saying, I can't stand Trump or I can't stand this person, have love for them. It's like what Martin Luther King said. He said, God said that I have to love my enemies, I don't have to like them. And I have friends who are conservatives as well, and we have debates all the time. My friend just like, you're a crazy liberal, and I'm just like, and you're a crazy conservative. And so we'll go back and forth. But one of the things that I was going to ask you, the last thing I was going to ask is, are you, I know we talked about this earlier, but are you, because so many people have been asking me this, are you considering, at least considering, another run? And also, are you in the midst of writing another book?
I ran for president because every cell in my being said yes.
Mm-hmm.
I will do it if every cell of my being ever says yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way for me to know right now
Mm-hmm.
whether or not that will ever occur.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that my running was equal part exhilaration and brutality.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something to take lightly.
Oh yeah.
And if I were to ever do it again, it would be because I honestly felt that my doing so was a meaningful contribution,
Mm-hmm.
that I was presenting to the American people an option they would not otherwise have.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it with an absolute intention of winning.
Mm-hmm.
If I ever get to that point, I'll let you know.
Okay, I
Uh,
will, because and the
I
day
won't
you
know
do.
probably for quite a while whether that will ever occur. But in the meantime, the point is to help articulate a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did drop out of the race, I made a commitment to seek to remain as inconvenient as possible to
Mm-hmm.
those who I feel need to be
And you have
inconvenient.
been.
Thank you.
And do you? Is there another book that you're writing? I know Politics of Love just not too long came out, but are you writing another one that is?
Okay. Well, first of all, I am writing twice a month. I'm writing an article for Newsweek,
Mhm.
and also I'm doing my podcast now.
Hmm.
My next book, I think, is probably going to be going back to the more spiritual in nature.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to say before we go,
Hmm.
Joe Biden said recently, let's give each other a chance.
Hmm.
Let's give him a chance.
I will. I definitely will,
I
Marianne.
don't feel that you're not, I feel that you are, but I just think we all need to remind each other, let's give him a chance. I mean, I know we need to be in this conversation now because of these appointments,
Hmm.
cabinet appointments, etc. But I do feel sometimes I need to remind myself, give him a chance.
Me too. Do
Let's,
you think that we should do that too with the QAnon supporters? Like, because I feel as if they've been misled, and I feel as if also as well, she's like, we should hear them out. Do you think that we should reach out to the Trump supporters
Trump supporters and QAnon are a very different thing. I mean, they overlap, but
Mhm.
Trump supporters, some very fine people voted for Trump. I mean, you and I might not understand how they could see it that way, but of course, serious conservatives, there are high-minded conservative principles, and of course, we must. QAnon, however, I see as a dangerous conspiracy theory, particularly as a Jew. Its anti-Semitic elements are extremely um, disturbing to me, and no, I don't feel that my job is to try to reach out to the QAnon conspiracy
Mhm.
theorist person. I see it as dangerous. I see it as a
Mhm.
collective psychosis, really,
Mhm.
and I just support any efforts um, by our government authorities to monitor any of the right-wing hate groups, which essentially, let's be clear here.
Mhm.
Part of the QAnon philosophy is that the group that they see as the pedophile satanic ring,
Mhm.
their conversation there is what's called eliminationist.
Mhm.
And eliminationist conversation is what you had in Rwanda before the genocide. They actually talk about Trump, or I don't know who they say are going to do it now, is going to come into mainly Hollywood
Mhm.
and, get all these people together and execute them.
Oh my gosh.
Execute them. No, there is nothing funny there, and there is nothing for us to try to understand.
Mhm. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Marianne. Before you go, can you leave us with an inspirational message for the
Well,
youth?
there is a line that Martin Luther King used to quote that we've all heard by now, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And that has always been true in this country. We answered slavery with abolition, and we answered institutionalized suppression of women with women's suffrage, and
Mhm.
we answered the segregation with civil rights. And we are rising up in our time. And we all have something to celebrate and be
Mhm.
grateful for right now, because we're seeing, um, as we speak, a rising up of consciousness in the United States. The
Mhm.
journey is going to be long, it's not over, but there is as much reason, I believe, to look at the future with hope as there is to look at the future with sober alarm. And the most inspiring thing to me is realizing that the choice will be determined by our own individual actions. And we all know a lot of people who see the world just like we do, and we're going to all work together, and we're all going to play our part. And one day, Americans will look back on this generation and knowing that our generation, like others,
Mhm.
ultimately pulled out the miracle.
Wow. Thank you so much, Marianne. Marianne's
Thank
newest book,
you.
you guys, is A Politics
Thank
of Love. And may I just say, Marianne, is whenever I talk to you, it's just absolutely amazing. There's a night, sometimes I'll see things and you've seen me text you sometimes. It's like, Marianne, check this out, and it's just been awesome. And I also recommend people to please read this one as well, Enchanted Love. All her books are absolutely timeless. No matter when you read them, it feels like they're new. So thank you so much, Marianne, for all that you've done. You are you're incredible. You really are. Thank you.
It takes one to know one. Thank you. Much
Thank you.
love, Guy. Bye.
Awesome. Bye-bye.